Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Parallax Abstraction, and welcome to another episode of Retro Flashback, showcasing gaming's roots for a new generation. So, today we are going to be taking a look at another title from the Sonic's Ultimate Genesis collection. There's a bunch of things I'd like to showcase from this, and I don't intend to do them all in, endless succession, but I wanted to showcase a couple of the more interesting ones sort of off the bat. So, today we're taking a look at E-SWAT. City Under Siege. E-SWAT. So, this is a really odd game. This is an action platformer, sort of in the vein of Bad Dudes, Crime City, kind of codename Viper, you know, stuff like that, I guess. But it has a bit of a twist on it. A couple of different twists. It's that type of game, but it also is kind of like that meets Gradius, I guess, or Gradius, I guess is the best way I could put it. The game has selectable power-ups that you can earn at later points to do rather interesting things and to sort of mix up your attacks. It's a really interesting title, and it's fairly well regarded by a lot of Genesis fans, but I don't know. I actually had never played it before today, and I put some time into it before recording here. And yeah, I don't know. It's weird, but there are some very bold design choices in this that I thought it would be fun to talk about. So, we're going to get this started off here. Now, first thing we're going to do here that you're going to notice is I'm going to set this game down to easy, and I'm going to give myself all the lives. This is probably not the way the designers wanted you to play it, but I'm doing this for a very particular reason that I'm going to endeavor to show you here, because I have to get through the first two levels to show you this. And I can do it. I did do it in my other playthrough, but we'll see if I can do it as well when I'm recording here. So, to be honest, turning this down to easy, giving yourself more lives, yeah, obviously that helps, but I turned this down to easy before, and it didn't seem to make much of an appreciable difference to me, but we'll see what happens. So, what's the plot of this? Who the hell knows? It's the future, you're a cop, apparently the only one who can stop whatever people are attacking Silent City, I guess. But this is what's a little interesting about this game. So it's this weird futuristic scenario. I have no idea why, you know, when there are apparently a million guys with guns everywhere that, I guess, cutbacks or something, and you're like the entire police department. I don't know why you're sent in alone to deal with this stuff, but whatever. So you're going to see this looks pretty bog standard so far, right? I'm like, just a dude with a gun, not unlike a lot of the more, I don't want to say realistic 80s brawlers, but the ones set in more modern settings. Pretty boring looking, right? Not too much to it. There's just enemies with patterns and slightly different weapons, and your objective is to take them out. And as you can see, a lot of them are pretty friggin' dumb. A lot of the base level enemies won't shoot you unless you're on your same plane, even though they'll spawn in on totally different planes, which I don't quite get the point of that. And these gun guys just have a very straight pattern. They'll shoot down when you're below them. They'll shoot towards you when you're on their level. Not much to it, right? The levels are pretty linear. There is a little bit of exploring you can do, especially in a couple of later levels, to farm extra points. This game does keep score. It keeps score in an off-screen manner, not unlike Contra used to do. So you can see your score, but you can only see it in between levels. I hate those dudes. You can only see your score in between levels. And so you can fish for score, but scores in this game, it doesn't matter very much. This game is actually kind of a spiritual sequel, if you will, to an arcade game, also called E-SWAT. I believe it was called E-SWAT, Cyber Police E-SWAT, that's what it was. So you see here our first boss is a chopper, because, sure. Yeah, Cyber Police E-SWAT was a very similar game to this one, but this one actually has a fair amount of different content in it, which is kind of interesting. Cyber Police E-SWAT got versions on about 1 million different platforms in addition to the arcade, but this one was done specifically for the Genesis, and Sega decided to put a little bit of extra content in it and make it a bit of a different game, which is kind of cool. But you'll see, yeah, there is some exploration to be done, but it doesn't matter much unless you're into this for points, and this isn't a game that really benefits from points. So you see this is a pretty standard pattern boss here that we're taking out. A lot of the bosses are fairly pattern. And you may notice that though we had everything on the bottom of the screen, wait for it,
Mission complete.
Gotta love them Genesis voice samples. You'll notice that I couldn't actually select any weapons there, and there's a reason for that. And this was one of the bolder design choices of this game, and you're going to see this one here. This level's definitely very different. You have to infiltrate cyber prison, because, you know, okay. And you'll see that you start off on a moving cart, and this is kind of cool, because in this level you can take a whole bunch of different paths through the level and you'll encounter different types of enemies on these tracks, things like that. And what you ultimately have to do is find a gap in this fencing so that you can actually get in and basically make your way all the way back downstairs again through all these levels in order to get to the area which will take you to the next room where the bosses are. Kind of interesting, kind of frustrating that the game kind of like makes you go all the way to the end of one level just to have to fight yourself all the way back in a much shorter or a much in a much longer way. It's kind of a weird choice, but kind of neat at the same time. Ah, there was my way in and I screwed it up. So the interesting thing about this game, and I think the really boldest design decision that Sega chose to make with this game, is that you are just sort of this bog standard, boring, not very powerful, kind of frustrating to play human police officer for the first couple of levels. And that's kind of it. So here we go. Here's our way in. And when you get to the end of this level, this is when the game kind of goes in a totally different direction and really opens up from a mechanical perspective and also really turns up the taps on the difficulty. So you probably saw in the first mission there that I wasn't having much of a hard go of things. You know, the enemies are all pretty straightforward, very easy to predict. This is no different. I kind of screwed up getting up here, but... So you see I got to the end of this level, now I got to drop down, now I got to make my way across the other way, and I'll have to do this a couple more times before I get to the boss of this level. And you see that there's really no challenge here. You know, you just got to keep shooting. These big sort of chain whipping enemies are completely threatless unless you get near them. So if you stand back and just keep shooting at them, you won't have a problem. The gun guys will come on the screen, but will take several seconds before they start shooting at you, so you shoot them quickly enough. You can literally get through this whole on-foot section of this level without ever taking a hit, and it doesn't require much effort. And don't think this is because I turned the game down to easy. I originally finished this area playing on normal, and it wasn't really any harder. The difficulty levels in this game, I haven't tried turning it up to hard, to be fair, but I don't know. Turning it down to easy doesn't seem to make any difference. I figured the enemies would have less hit points or do less damage, but they don't. So, and there isn't any fewer of them either, so... Okay, picked up a life power up there. So I want to get through these first two levels here so that I can show you guys what sort of the real point of this game is, where it opens up. And it's kind of funny because the achievement tied to this game through Sonic's Ultimate Genesis Collection actually is to complete level 2 and sort of unlock the real point of this game, which I thought was kind of amusing. And I found out a little interesting factoid, too, when I was researching this. Backbone Entertainment, who sadly are no longer with us, who are the developers of this collection and many others, and in addition to some other games beyond that, apparently had actually pitched a new E-SWAT game to Sega for modern systems. I'm going to assume it would have been a downloadable title, but they were basically pitching the idea of taking this and modernizing it. And it never got greenlit. I imagine that was probably one of the things they did not too long before they went out of business. So the project never ended up getting greenlit, and I'm curious what could have been done with this formula on newer systems, and you'll see why in a minute here. So this is another pattern boss you're going to see. Looks fairly tricky, but it's really just, again, it's all patterns. One of these guys shoots high, the other shoots low and hops around. You just got to make sure that you stay on top of their shots, which is a little frustrating, I will admit, especially playing off an Xbox 360 pad, because one of the real flaws with this game is that the controls, to me, from a directional perspective, seem really, really laggy. Like, they're mushy and they don't respond very well, and I've died several times simply because, much like with that boss there, the controller just didn't do what I asked it to, almost like what happened there. Now that could be because of the 360 controller. I'm playing with the analog stick because the 360 D-pad is all but useless, and it's possible that the lag is coming from there. Alright, so I got a couple of these guys here. And there, did it again. It didn't turn properly. That is really aggravating. I really hope I don't have to continue here. So, be warned on that. That could be because I never played this game back in the day, so it may have had poor laggy controls. It could just be the way the 360 controller implementation works in this, or how the 360 controller works. If you're playing this with an arcade stick, or perhaps the PS3 D-pad, you might have a much better experience. So, that's just saying that there. So yeah, these guys are pretty simple pattern. When they turn into these weird Terminator-looking things, they start to shoot more frequently, so you gotta really keep mashing that trigger. But I got him.
Mission complete.
Now here's where things get interesting. Wait for this. What's this? Crazy Nutty Weapon Cyber Suit. I am now E-SWAT. Apparently, being an E-SWAT is a greater rank than being the Chief of Police. And now I gotta defend Neo 3 Mile Island? I don't know. So, why did I just get this now? Why did I have to infiltrate cyber prison to get it? What is the story conceit for why I have this and why I didn't have it before? Couldn't tell you. Story is... To say that story is not this game's strong suit is a massive understatement. But, check this out now. Now, I have the ability to pick up additional weapons, and much like a Gradius game, as you pick weapons up, you can select between them. So I got my regular old weak-ass shot here, or I can do, I think that's PC it says, and this is cool because it's kind of like shot, except you can shoot it a lot faster, and if you hold off for a second, you get that. Kind of like a Shoryuken thing going on there, right? So that's pretty excellent. And as you can see, picked up some other stuff. Now these are some missiles that I picked up. Missiles are pretty useless because as you can see, they're incredibly slow and they hug the ground. So it's kind of like, it's not very good, right? But yeah, so this is where stuff gets really cool, right? Because obviously now you've got all these different weapons. You've got a whole bunch of different ways you can attack the level. As you can see, you've got a way higher life bar. So you have the ability to take quite a bit more punishment. But as you're probably plainly seeing here, the game compensates for that by really ramping the difficulty up. There are a lot more enemies that are coming into play now, and they're a lot tougher. They move quicker, they can take more hit points. Oh good, I lifed up there. So they can do... Stuff gets pretty tough. Like, the fact that you've got this E-SWAT suit is pretty amazing, but it certainly doesn't make the game a cakewalk by any measure. Ooh, this is the first time I've ever seen this super gun. Curious what benefit I get from this. But this is where things kind of get interesting. I mean, I'll be honest with you, definitely coming up to this, when I first played this game, first played the couple of levels, even knowing that it supposedly gets better later on, I was like, man, the first couple of levels of this game are boring as hell, because it's just, it's a very mediocre... How the hell do I... Oh, there we go. It's a... Okay. Well, that's pretty amazing. So the burner is clearly your special. And because I was actually wondering up to this point what the point of that burner meter in the upper right was. But I noticed that I thought it maybe had something to do with this level I was on, but it looks like it drains as you use your special. So I learned something very interesting. So that's basic. Yeah, so the burner is basically your special. It's like your screen clearing weapon. And how effective it is determinant on how big that burner meter is. That's pretty neat. I like that. That's a cool system. So, yeah. I think it's a very interesting, bold design choice on the designer's part to build the game where you basically have to play kind of the mediocre part of it, where you're a weak sauce human cop for a couple of levels, and sort of fight your way through that, and then once you've proved you're better at it, the game sort of equips you up and is like, alright, guess what? Now you're friggin' E-SWAT, go to town. Now there's a couple schools of thought on that though, right? It's a neat concept to be sure, and certainly something you would never see in a modern game today, where it's all about giving the player instant gratification as quickly as possible because, oh my god, you know, people can't work for anything anymore. Jesus, hell no. What are we, savages? And I like the fact that they chose to do that, because even back in this day and age, that was not something that was commonly done in the way they did it here. But the flip side of that is you're still playing a really kind of crappy action platformer for 2 levels. And if you're playing this with a normal amount of lives on the more normal difficulty, like that may be, and especially if you're not a skilled player at this genre, that's a lot to ask of somebody before the game gets good. You know, it's like when they talk about a lot of longer form RPGs, and they're like, oh, you got to play this for, you know, 15 hours before it gets really good. And I'm kind of like, well, why am I paying a bunch of money to buy a game only to, you know, toil away in boring mundanity for a whole pile of hours until I get to the part that's entertaining? That just doesn't make any bloody sense to me. So that's kind of the thing with that. I'll admire their choice, but still, that was kind of dumb. Now, as you can see here, I've also gotten a kind of a double jump. It's not really a double jump, but it's, you basically have a rocket capability. I hadn't been using it up to this point. And this apparently, I was not paying attention before, this apparently also does affect the burner capability. So that's an even more interesting dichotomy, which is the fact that your burner is not only dependent, your special weapon is not only dependent on this, but so is your ability to fly. So you kind of got to strike a balance between, hey, how much do I want to use this cool flight ability versus how much do I want to have my screen clearing weapon available to me as well. That's pretty neat. So, I don't know. I mean, I've definitely played better action platformers than this. Like, this is pretty slow. The fact that there's no checkpointing beyond right before the boss is pretty mean. You know, in arcades I could maybe kind of understand it, but not only is this not an arcade game, even a lot of arcade games weren't this mean about it. And yeah, I don't know how. It's hard to say how I feel about this. This game has some very interesting choices to it, and very interesting concepts at play that I respect a lot. But it's also kind of a slow-moving, imprecise, poorly controlling action platformer. And you can have all the neat mechanics in the world, but if your core gameplay is still weak, well, your core gameplay is still weak, right? That's kind of the way this goes. And, yeah, I don't know. And needless to say, though, I mean, this game does have a lot of challenge in it. There is, you know, those checkpoints do create challenge on their own. The enemies are fruitful and fairly strong, even after you get the E-SWAT suit, more so, in fact. And if you choose to... There are continues in this, but they are limited. And if you choose to turn this game off, you lose everything, as is the case with many titles like this. So, god dang. So, yeah, there's definitely some challenge to be found here. I really think it could have benefited a lot from a mid-mission checkpoint. Don't have to put them very frequently, just one in the middle, which is what most games did, would have been more than fine. I think would have taken the edge off. But, yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting title to play because of its ideas more than its gameplay, I guess you could say. And if you're someone who's trying to learn about games and trying to learn, you know, the roots of them and where they came from, well, I scored well at least, and are trying to figure out, trying to see a bunch of different takes on a certain genre, this is a very good exercise for that. There's a lot to see that's different from the norm in here, and I think this title is to be applauded for that. You know, these guys, when Sega came to them and said, hey, we need a side-scrolling action platformer, I'm sure these guys could have just cranked out another generic, you know, soulless thing that no one would remember by now, and done fine with it. But they chose to do something very unique. They chose to give you a very delayed reward system, something that really requires you to gain some affinity with the game and fight your way to a certain point in order to sort of get to the really neat stuff. And what you get is some mechanical design that has never really been seen before or since in the action platformer genre. And I think it's really interesting that they took the ideas of a shmup series, a spaceship shmup series that really has nothing to do with this genre whatsoever, and they managed to make that work with a side-scrolling platformer. They sort of married two mechanics of two very different kinds of games in a very compelling way, and I think that's pretty cool. But they did that, but they kind of fell down on some of the other core design tenets. And it's not that they forgot to bring the fun to go along with all these ideas. There is fun here, but I don't think they paid enough attention to what made the more generic games in this genre good on their own merits before they added in their own twist. I think they should have taken what those games offered and brought their own spin to it. Instead, what they did was they added their own spin, but the rest of it is kind of a poor representation of what is available in that genre, even around this time. So, I don't know. It's a mixed bag. Generic term, I know. But it's kind of true. There's good and bad to be found here. I think I'd like to play some more of this game. I'd like to spend some more time with it, get a little bit further, see if it opens anymore. But would I rather play this over, say, more Codename Viper or even some more Rolling Thunder or, hell, just over Gradius? I don't know. That's a tough call. But your mileage may vary. If you like one genre more than the other, you may find something more interesting to like about this one. And if you play it with, the standard amount of lives and on the standard difficulty, then sort of as the designers intended, then you may get a better experience than me. But yeah, I don't know. So yeah, that is E-SWAT, published and developed by Sega in 1991 for the Sega Genesis and Mega Drive. I've been playing it through Sonic's Ultimate Genesis Collection for the Xbox 360, which is also on the PlayStation 3, and this also is on the Wii Virtual Console, so there are a number of digital options available to play this. I'm not sure if this is on PC or not. I didn't see mention of it, so I'm going to say it's not. So you have a bunch of different options to play it. I mean, fans of the genre, you could probably do with checking this out, but yeah, I've seen better. My name has been Parallax Abstraction. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you next time.